I sit in everybody's view. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All set. So good morning, everyone, and thank you, Valerie, for the kind introduction. Together with my colleague, Matthias, we are very pleased to welcome you here in Singapore for this session. And today, we will take you on a short journey through the heart of our work, so the IFRA standards. So the IFRA standards are the flagship program of the fragrance industry. They make sure that the fragrance ingredients are safely used around the world. Today, we live in a world of growing complexity, more regulation, different rules from country to country, and also rising expectation from the consumer, NGOs, and regulators. In other words, we are navigating a world that is more connected, but also more complicated than ever. And in this context, the fragrance industry, through the IFRA standard, take a global risk-based stewardship approach. This means we move from science to risk assessment to risk management so that the fragrance ingredient can be safely used across the world. So you can think of the standard as a living system. They evolve as science advances. They also evolve as consumer habit change, as well as regulation develops. And here on the slide, it's how the process works. So first, we have RIFM, the Research Institute for Fragrance Material, who prepare safety assessment. These assessments are there reviewed and endorsed by an independent expert panel for fragrance safety. And based on this science, when there is a safe use concern for a specific ingredient, IFRA will take risk management measure. And more importantly, we do this through an inclusive process. So there is a public consultation open to all relevant stakeholders. So the IFRA standards are not created behind closed doors. They are the result of science, transparency, and broad participation. So we generally aim to combine a number of standards into one amendment, typically published every 3 years. And what's next? The 52nd amendment to the IFRA standard is coming. It will focus entirely on restriction standards. And here you have the key point that you should be aware. So the public consultation, as I mentioned previously, will start towards the end of the year with a formal notification expected late in 2026. In terms of content, we foreseen to introduce approximately 50 new standards, and this amendment will also revise 16 existing ones. Last but not least, this amendment will also include the revision of the IFRA Furokumarin policy, turned into one revised standard and the removal of 8 existing ones. So now I would like to take a moment to have a closer look to one special case, the furukumarins. So what are these? Furukumarin are natural components found in many citrus oils and in other natural ingredients. They are not added intentionally as fragrance ingredient because of their safety profile. Indeed, they can make the skin more sensitive to sunlight. But why is this revised policy unique? Because, unlike our usual process, it did not rely on reform safety program. Instead, it reflects the strong engagement of the membership and the stakeholder across the region. So the furukumarin policy, what will be included? So we now focus on 8 furukumarin markers, and the policy will include 3 threshold limits for skin contact product. And how did we get there? It has been a long journey, and we work to 3 main work streams. First, we developed an analytical method to measure individual furukumarins in essential oil. 2, we had to select the key furukumarin marker for quantification and risk reduction. And 3, we also updated the weight of evidence to support the threshold limit, ensuring safe product for the consumer. We also built the revision of this policy on existing regulation. Starting with Europe, where in the cosmetic product regulation, a level of 1 ppm apply in sun protection and bronzing product. This limit was also adopted in a number of Asian countries. Then Switzerland, where the restriction is a bit different and stricter. So we make sure that all the existing regulations were carefully considered into our revision, ensuring consistency wherever possible. And at this point, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Dr. Matthias Wey. So Matthias is leading the scientific affair in IFRA for many years, and he has been involved at the very start of this regulation. So Matthias, perhaps you can share more about the history of, this revision, but also about the ongoing dialogue with the Swiss authority, showing how important harmonization is.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Warm welcome also from my side. Happy to be here. And I think it's, thank you. I think it's a very nice case to show that what we are doing is not happening in isolation. Maybe also one word, Jennifer, why people might ask, why did RIFM not do the safety assessment? Because these furukumarins are not used as such. So our RIFM colleagues are assessing all the materials used as such as fragrance ingredients. And here, historically, we are dealing with, as you mentioned, a constituent in many NCS, as said, is known to cause some problems. So we supported, this time the other way around, our RIFM colleagues by collecting the science. And it's quite interesting, and I think it was also showing to me that an authority is so carefully watching what we are doing, and in this case, the Swiss. So they were actually reaching out to us and asking, well, your existing policy, as you mentioned, we are updating it, so they were well aware of the existing one, is they felt it was outdated, and they were open enough to let us know and said, what are you doing? What are your plans? We said, well, we are working on a revision, and this is what we want to do. So we really had a very open dialogue with these regulators over quite some time, while we were already working on the revision of the policy. And certainly the aim is that we have, and you mentioned that, as much alignment as possible with regulation, but still we have our own scientific point of view. And science, as we all know, is not black and white. Even scientists draw different conclusions on the same toxicological data. Maybe that topic will come up more frequently in the coming days. Even so, we would all hope that science is black and white. Science is also a gray zone. But here, I think we had a good opportunity, and there was also, I think, a learning process. I don't know how you look at it. And I think we have a 50% win here. So where's the win? And for this policy, maybe more important than for any other, and Jennifer alluded to it, it starts with quantification and identification of the materials we are looking at. So which fluorocoumarine, how much of it, and how do you determine? And you mentioned we had a great work of our analytical colleagues in developing a methodology first. But still, the methodology allows to quantify 16 broadly distributed, well-known fluorocoumarines, and there is more. So which ones to choose? And the regulation also is not clear on that. So in the European regulation, there were 2 actually used markers. IFRA had 1. So we felt we need a better and more sound basis for selecting the markers that we can then also convince regulators to buy into. And we did that. So we were looking at the toxicological profile of the fluorocoumarines. So how strong, how potent are they really in triggering photoreactions? And there was quite a lot of literature out there. So we had a dossier established, and we selected, as you mentioned, 8 markers. And we shared the dossier with the Swiss regulators. And only 2 days ago, we learned that they are changing their regulation and they're incorporating our markers in the Swiss regulation. So far, you would have needed to quantify theoretically any fluorocoumarine, which is not possible, but at least anything that was available. So I personally think that's quite an achievement, and it's great for us to get this out again of a dialogue, exchanging with the regulators, sharing all our knowledge, putting all our science on the table, and then see what comes out. So in this case, we are very lucky that this happened. We were not yet successful when it comes to the limits. Jennifer mentioned that the Swiss case is a unique one, but I think they're carefully following what we are doing. And I think that's maybe something that over the years, you mentioned I do this maybe too many years now already, we have really improved on transparency. We have really improved on dialogue with the stakeholders, with the regulators, so people know what we are doing and they know why we are doing things. When I started, people always looked at me like, well, here's a strange guy from IFRA coming with new standards, and we really don't know why and where they're coming from. Having this process much more transparent, clearly outline the roles of RIFM, as you explained so nicely, I think that's a big achievement. So that's how far I would go, and then I think you will carry on from here, or?
No, I think we have another case.
We have another case study.
Yeah.
Good. All right, I click on this. Maybe, because we talked a lot about fluorocoumarines and we think it's very relevant, shall we break here? If somebody in the audience, because we have ample time to talk about the standards. Anybody having a question on the fluorocoumarine case or the policy that is going to be expressed in the standard? Yes, Fakri, please. Do you have a micro close to you? I hear you very well.
Maybe for the people online.
Yes, we need to give you a mic for the people online.
The people online, yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Matthias, for this introduction. I had 2 questions. One was on the the first word of the title of the presentation, risk-based. Is that to say that you've been able to find a way to reconcile things with the way ECHA and so on sees things, which is more hazard-based, regretfully? Are we moving back towards risk-based approaches? So this is one. And about furocoumarins, there's been a lot of research out there demonstrating that furocoumarins were quite useful in controlling parathymine, the evolution of parathymine in essential oils. So are these aspects taken into consideration of the problem that they seem to present on the one hand when they're dealt with individually, as opposed to when they're part of a matrix, and the good they seem to be doing regarding things like parathymine and in controlling that evolution? Has the science and the legal framework, are they both able to take that science into account? Are they on par? Thank you.
Thank you, Fagri. Do you want to take any of these questions on maybe the hazard part?
You can start and I can complement if need be.
Okay, actually on the hazard part, our next case study might give you some indications on where we're going. I'm absolutely unaware of the research you talked about, that the impact of furocoumarins might have on an ingredient. That actually so far didn't cause any concerns to us unless it came to a hazard classification and the downstream user consequences. So the focus of the work has really been on controlling the actual effects of the furocoumarins, which are well known and which caused a lot of trouble. I think that was even before my time, when there was the so-called burlock dermatitis really in the market. And I think by controlling the furocoumarins, that completely disappeared. So I think that's also a success story. On the other end, I mean, the complexity of naturals, I don't know how to say that, but it's very difficult to assess. And in this case, we really focus on this element, which is also already regulated. I don't know if it has any impact on the parathymine story, but that's a different discussion and quite challenging as well. And the hazard thing, if you give me a break, or if you give us a break, because we will talk through it in the para-BMHCA storyline. Anything to add?
No.
Okay. Other questions? Before we jump into the BMHCA, because it's interesting, and we are faced from time to time with questions now, because out of the process to which Fakir was referring to, these more hazard-based restrictions, regulatory actions taken based on hazard only, if I'm allowed to say. This is also leading to some confusion. We are still, and Jennifer very carefully pointed that out, we are defending a risk-based approach still. And we think it's the right thing to do, because for nearly every material and for nearly every endpoint, you can derive a threshold of safe use. And safe use, that's the focus of our activity. So hazard is now, unfortunately, stopping at the hazard level and taking regulatory decisions at that level. We see that happening more frequently. And the para-BMHCA is a perfect example, because it has been prohibited in the European cosmetic regulation, and I think there's discussion in other regions to take that ban on, based on hazard, based on that it was identified as a carcinogen, CMR. And we actually, and it's also a complicated case in the way it went through, and I'm always looking to the side where my colleague Christina sits, because I'm pretty sure the moment I'm going to say anything wrong in the context of regulation, she will throw something at me so that I will see I did say something wrong. I actually wait, I hope you will do it if one of my statements is not correct. So, It was classified, self-classified actually, CMR2. And under the cosmetic regulation framework, that meant you have to prepare a safety dossier, you give the safety dossier to the scientific advisory committee, that's how it works in that structure. They will make a judgment, and if you're lucky, the judgment is, yes, a safe use possible, and that will go into the regulation. And that process had started. Already then, in a separate process, because this is different agencies, the classification was looked at. And it moved from a CMR2, and I'm really sorry if these numbers don't mean anything to you, to a CMR1. So the hazard classification was more severe than industry had considered. But this more severe hazard classification triggers a different process in defending the material. And at that moment in time, it's not anymore possible to just, in brackets, send in a dossier to the authorities. You have to fulfill more criteria. And one of these criteria is the material has to be used or should be able to be used in food. That is not the case for BMHCA. And you can even see that in our standards. The manufacturer never did foresee that the material can be used in food. So I think it's our category 1 and 6, if I'm not mistaken, where there's the potential of ingestion. There, also IFRA doesn't allow it because this exposure route is not foreseen. But for all the other exposures, yes, we have safe levels. Now, because we failed this criteria to update our dossier, we could not send a dossier to defend the use of para-BMHCA under the CMR1 classification. And because of that, and because the first opinion was inconclusive of the SSES, there was no possibility to send up a follow-up dossier. And then the regulator said, okay, it has to be banned. It is banned not because it cannot be safely used. It was banned because there is an SSES opinion saying it can be safely used in certain applications. We have concerns over aggregate exposure, and we were planning to address the concerns about aggregate exposure in our follow-up dossier, but we couldn't send it anymore because there was more criteria that needed to be filled, which we couldn't. Christina, does it make sense? Thank you. So it's complicated. So I would say we lost the material in the regulatory requirement of scheme requirement, but again, not because it's not safe, but we didn't have the opportunity to demonstrate its safety. And my colleagues in Europe, and with the support of Christina, now currently there is discussion ongoing if these criteria can change, because it's really tough to defend a material when it has a CMR1 or 1A, 1B classification. So I think it's very interesting because people don't understand why can we as fragrance industry around the globe say you can safely use it, and in Europe it's prohibited. So maybe we were able to explain that, and I think it's very important to understand this because, and now I come back to you, Fagri, in your question, why do these hazard classifications trigger so much downstream user consequences? And yes, we are working on it. Yes, we try to raise the safety assessment paradigm. How successful we will be, I don't know, but I think it's an important, if I'm allowed to use the word, fight to do. And by holding and presenting the IFRA standards, we are breaking the point for risk assessment as a basis for risk management and not hazard. Maybe I'm talking too much. Questions? Was that clear? It was a regulatory lecture beyond actually the IFRA standards. Any questions in this context? No. Yes, please. I can't see anything because I'm blinded by the light.
Hi, I'm Sridhar from Takasago. It was very good, making us understand the logic behind this. Of course, we know that this material has been banned for cosmetics, and there are some restrictions in place for non-cosmetics. What is the view of IFRA on the use as we move forward into the non-cosmetic usage? Is there some thoughts behind it, or there's...
No, once it's in the regulation, it's in the regulation. I don't see a chance for opening that case. The only thing we can do is to take the learnings to prevent or, well, manage comparable cases in the future. But I don't think anybody's going, no, Christina's shaking her head, and Christina shakes her hand, it's a no. But again, we take our lessons. Unfortunately, that's as much as I can say.
Oh, it's not a question.
And then you will do the...
Hello, Joris Theus, IFF. Just in response to this, I would say, yeah, we lost the battle in Europe, but we have an opportunity to still convince regulators and safety assessors in Asia, for example.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, we should not give up.
No, and we don't. And I think this explaining, again, the rationale why the ban happened should help other regulators to take their own decision based on safety.
Yeah, we need to break this copy-paste mechanism that exists and really have regional regulators assess the science. That's the goal, yeah. Thank you.
Questions?
Just to let you know, we are having a panel following, and you could spare some questions for the panel.
No worries, I keep it short. So Felix from BASF, just to comment or complement to Joris. Yes, indeed, I think that is something we also can bring then to other countries in the world. And I mean, we're just focusing or talking, maybe as a reply to that question, to the cosmetic area. The home care area, of course, it's not banned, just,
No,
that it's not misleading.
Good. Maybe I stop the questions here. I let Jennifer conclude this first session, and then I would love to have my panelists on stage so that we can also ask them some questions.
Yes, so maybe just a few words to conclude this presentation on the IFRA standards. So as we mentioned during this presentation, the standards are here to help ensure the safe use of fragrance ingredients. And it is why we strongly believe that a global approach is more relevant than ever. And maybe also one last word is that this global fragrance industry product stewardship approach is unique. It is what brings science, collaboration and safety together. And we again believe that it should remain one cornerstone of IFRA's mission moving forwards. So I don't know if Matthias would like to add anything.
I couldn't have said it nicer, so no, absolutely not.
So now back to Matthias and then for the discussion with the panel. Yeah.
So yeah, thanks so far. And then we will have our panel. Great. Good. So I think while people are bringing more chairs on the stage, I would like to welcome, yes, perfect, my panel members. And so we have a nice group of fragrance industry representative, customer industry, and regulators and associations. And I will start with the ladies. Perfect. So we have Marie-Hélène Beausoleil from L'Oréal. We have Catherine O from Accord, Australia. We have Sirupin, and now I'm struggling, Sharasla Trangzi, and if it didn't spell it right, I hope she will forgive me. Thank you. We have Klaus Oliver Schmidt from Simrise, so Sirupin is from the Thai FDA. And we have Sean Prezo from the New Zealand EPA. Thank you for joining here. Good. Feel free. Do we have enough chairs? Yes. Thank you. Hey. So, I'm so unused to this Madonna microphone. I feel so like a star. And if this takes on longer, I will start performing singing on stage. But then the room will be empty. So welcome the panel members. I'm not going to be kind by starting with posing questions to my female participants here. The order in which I'm going to go into this is, I would call it down or up the supply chain, however you want to do it. So I would actually start with asking the first question to the representative of the fragrance industry, to Klaus Oliver. And so, Klaus Oliver, from your point, looking at from both industry and governance perspective, how can IFRA balance these ambitious goals in setting global standards, which we already touched in the presentation, by keeping them relevant, useful, and implementable, and so that they can be eventually even adopted by regulators? What's your point as a representative of this industry on which we actually impose these rules?
Yes, thanks, Matthias. A very relevant question. So when going back in time, I think the IFRA standards are so relevant because they filled a vacuum in the past. There was not really any regulations, and then the industry, including IFRA, stepped forward and said, okay, we have to do something to make sure that our products are safe for the use of by consumers, and of course by our own workforce as well when handling with the materials. And that was great, and the foundation was science. You explained this before, and this is something that is valid because it's easy to be reproduced, it's neutral, and that will be also the foundation in the future. But I think what will change is now that there is a lot of regulation already out there, that now we have to go one step further to keep it relevant also for regulators, like in Switzerland, what you have explained as the example, to make sure that IFRA is listening what's going on, what are the new endpoints which are out there maybe, what is about ecotoxicology, how can we reflect this one into the standards. And that keeps the standards relevant in the future as well for the legislators, that they say, hey, this is the place to go to IFRA, because they are not only looking in a very narrow way into it, but in a very broad way, looking into new testing methods, not using any animal testing and so on. So if we have this all in our portfolio, then we keep relevant. And at the same time, this is exactly also what our customers expecting, what consumers wants to know about. And this is then also why the industry will keep adopting those standards, because they say this is helpful for us to bring the products in the market. At the same time, regulators saying, yes, you are respecting us and you work together with us. And this is the next step that should happen.
Thank you. That's you touched a lot of important points, I would say already, and maybe we'll pick up one or the other in the discussion. So I would now turn to Marie-Hélène. Yes, as representing a global manufacturer of what we call finished consumer products. So for us, it's the end product is the fragrance mixture, and then we hand it over to our customers. But you bring them in the market, and how do you value, or where do you see the value of the IFRA standards and for marketing your products across the globe?
IFRA standards are crucial in this global environment. First of all, to protect our consumers, because safety is global. There's no boundaries when we are talking about safety. And at L'Oréal, we are committed to deliver quality and safe product to all our consumers all over the planet. Recently, our CEO was interviewed in a TV show in France, and he said that there was more than 100 points of control before launching a product on the market. So as a big company, we have more than 40 brands. We are touching several categories of product like skincare, hair care, shampoo, hair color, fine fragrance, deodorants. So for us, safety is key, and there is no compromise on safety. We are touching billions of consumers, so the best way to protect our consumers is to deliver safe products, and that's where standards, IFRA standards, are very important. And we all know also how complex a fragrance is, and it has an expertise in assessing the safety that is very niche. I mean, we are very few here, and almost all of them are here, who knows very well how to assess the safety of our products. So that's where IFRA also is very important, aligned with RIFM and their standards to give us all the science around IFRA, around all the ingredients, fragrance ingredients that we are using. It's because it's science-based, and also because of the methodology of IFRA standards, which are based on risk and on exposure. And who else than RIFM has the best knowledge on where our fragrance ingredients are used. I mean, they're doing survey, and they know for each fragrance ingredients, the tonnage, the category of product where they are used, and the max percentage level. So it's very important for us to have these IFRA standards because they bring science and expertise. And also, IFRA standards are very important because they bring alignment. Alignment internally among all our brands, because safety is not a competition field, and also among all our stakeholders. And our main stakeholders are our fragrance houses. Sorry. And we want our fragrance houses to compete more on innovation, on creativity, than competing on safety. There is no place for compromising in terms of safety. And when we launch a brief at L'Oréal, we just want, again, our fragrance houses to compete on the creativity. And I always have some fun with my partners, fragrance houses, because I always say our fragrance dossier is like a phone book. We have many, many, many different definition, because we want every single fragrance house to compete on the same rules. And IFRA standards are bringing that. They are framing the rules of competition, and they just focus on the creativity. And the last but not the least, we need alignment. IFRA standard brings alignment among our own competitors. We almost use the same IFRA standards, but now we see emerging brands, local brands, that sometimes do not use IFRA standards. And that's where it jeopardizes sometimes the trust of our consumers, and it may bring to some side effects. And that's why we need maybe sometimes regulators, so I'm turning to you, to refer to IFRA standards to avoid such lack of competition, or to have sane competition on fragrances.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sounds very positive, very nice. I love to hear that. And I think you also touched on a number of very important points, specifically do not compete on safety. I think that's a great statement. And I love to see the IFRA standards being presented in this way. Catherine, so I'm moving now to an association. Again, I try to explain my rationale for talking to my panelists. You are a very relevant association in the quite diverse Asia-Pacific region, where there's a lot of different approaches. Where do you see any value from the IFRA standards, or are we helpful in any way in dealing with your regulators? Or where do you see the challenges and the benefits of a global safety program as we represent it?
Can I just start by saying that I think IFRA standards are amazing? And I
You can. Can somebody record this, maybe? Charles wanted to have some statements recorded, so we do that.
well,
Sorry.
this industry, your members are the absolute experts on fragrances. And what IFRA does with its standards is distill that expertise in a way that is accessible and usable. And that's incredible. What you've achieved is actually really amazing. And I think it is a shame that it is not being used more than it is now. And I think it's wonderful that it's recognised in a lot of the regions. And what we're working on in Australia is having that recognised in Australia, as it is in our neighbouring country, New Zealand, across the ditch, because that would actually create even playing field for all of the companies that are not only producing and manufacturing, but importing products into Australia as well. So what happens at the moment in Australia is that we don't officially recognise IFRA standard. So there are no regulations that say if you comply with IFRA standard, or you should comply with IFRA standard, or if you comply with it, then you won't have to comply with some of the other safety regulations. So what that means is that there is a lot of duplication of effort by regulators and industry in order to prove safety. And it also means that, given that we're less than 0.5% of the global population, less than 2% of the chemical market, we just don't have enough time. We don't have people to do the work that is being done at this level. So that means things are not getting done. So that means there's consumer detriment in either not being able to access products, and we see that in products like sunscreens, where every single fragrance component has to be assessed as a medicine ingredient. And by the way, they have to be listed into a 26BB or permissible ingredients list, which only contains 2,000 chemicals or so at the moment. And I think global use of fragrance components is over 3,000.
Yep.
So you can see how that would limit the access of sunscreen products in Australia. And that's just one example of one public health product. So I think there is a lot of benefit to using IFRA standard. And I think there is a lot of opportunities for collaboration. I think you've mentioned earlier that how do we keep relevant for regulators? And I think that's really the key in this engagement, and that is how do we get our regulators to see that you can be trusted? Because at the end of the day, it's all about trust. And I can completely put myself into a regulator's position, and if I knew nothing about IFRA and the processes you went through, and you didn't have the time to actually find out and research and make those connections, and it becomes really difficult to build that trust. So hopefully we can work together, and we can work as a bridge in Australia to build those trusts with regulators so they can be more broadly accepted.
Thank you. Very, very good. Specifically the word trust. Being a trusted partner, I think that's something where there remains still a challenge, and maybe we can discuss a little bit later on how we can get there. But I think we also have that in our DNA for the future. We want to be a trusted partner, and that comes automatically along with being transparent, and I mentioned that before. So I remember, before I moved to the other panelists, when I started, there was always a lot of reluctance in sharing what we are doing because we were scared of being criticized. That's exactly the wrong approach. You have to expose yourself, you have to say what you do, you have to explain how you do it. And if somebody criticizes you, then you have to reflect if there isn't eventually a good basis for this criticism, and then you move on in improving your procedures. And I think that's where we have done a lot, and maybe we can even be a little bit better in the future. Sirpin, you're joining us from Thailand, from the Thai FDA, and you have your local challenges, and you certainly also have your views on harmonization of regulation, but you always have to reflect and ensure that you represent the needs of your consumers in Thailand. So where do you see the relevance of looking into what IFRA is doing? Where do you see support for your government, and where do you maybe not see that?
Well, regarding to your questions, so I would like to tell you about the story of how Thailand regulates the cosmetic products in the country. And basically, as the member of the ASEAN country, we do align the regulations to the ASEAN Cosmetic Directive. And this is where all the ASEAN member states comes together to have the meeting twice a year to have the harmonization on the cosmetic regulatory approaches, which is called the ASEAN Cosmetic Directive. And to work on that, we have the meetings. The main meeting is the ASEAN Cosmetic Committee. And as I mentioned earlier, that the meeting takes place twice a year. And with the meeting of the ACC committee, there's another two meetings of the ASEAN Cosmetic Scientific Body and also the ASEAN Cosmetic Testing Laboratory Committee. And these two bodies come together for the scientific base of how to regulate the cosmetic in the ASEAN region. So basically, as I said that we do align with the ASEAN Cosmetic Directive. According to the Thai regulations, we have the Cosmetic Act 2015, and this is the key backbone for the cosmetic to be regulated and to be sold in Thailand safely. And talking about that, I would like to give you a couple of examples of how the fragrance ingredients, a couple of the example of the fragrance ingredients that has been the concern of the cause of the allergic reactions that was a thought that is initially from the IFRA standard and also the EU. And the examples are the atronol and chloroatronol, that those two substances as the fragrance ingredients were put into the banned list in Thailand and also in the ASEAN region in the ACD. And also another fragrance ingredients that has been regulated in ASEAN and Thailand is the benzyl alcohol, which is right now is regulated as the restricted substance in the cosmetic product. And I think with the standard from the IFRA, the ASEAN countries and ASEAN region and also Thailand can use the benefit from the scientific base to control the cosmetic for the safely use for the consumer in the country and in the region. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a very interesting insight in how you benefit from the scientific work that was done and can integrate it into regulatory frameworks. I think that's perfect. Sean, unfortunately, you are the last to, or maybe you were happy that you're the last that gets the first question. New Zealand has its own approach in looking into safety of consumer products and its own approach in looking at the IFRA standards. Can you tell us a little bit more, and maybe also if there is any expectations towards us on how we could do better, maybe in explaining why things are developed a certain way? So is there more need for transparency or explanatory approaches of the tools we're using and stuff like that? Over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Matthias. Yeah, so in New Zealand, we've taken the relatively, I guess, unique step of actually including the IFRA standards into our regulation for cosmetic products. So those regulations directly refer the standards as they are. And this is a pragmatic step that we have taken as a relatively small regulator. We don't want to repeat the work that our much bigger cousins overseas are doing. And IFRA provides a really good model in that sense for a high level of transparency, a high level of scientific capability. That is something that we can rely on when we are updating our regulations. One thing that would be really useful from our side, I think, is to increase that level of engagement for those explanations, particularly during the times when we're updating those regulations. And we have had a problem in the past where our own updates have not followed as frequently as the IFRA standards have been updated, which leads to a mismatch in our domestic regulations as opposed to what's happening globally. So there we need to, I think, have a greater level of engagement and discussion to make sure that we're keeping up. But generally we find them very useful. We find the transparency very, very good. And I think the key word that was mentioned before was trust. And we need to maintain that trust through that high level of transparency. Thanks.
Thank you. I think, that always is a challenge, and I think we have to definitely work on that, because one advantage, at least I see in the IFRA system, which is, as was mentioned before frequently, is very much linked to the RIFM system, is we are permanently evolving. We are adapting based on scientific developments. Maybe we can do better, but we are always evolving. And an issue that we are seeing, because regulatory uptake of standards is great, but the problem is if there is no follow-up update. So if they get stuck in one or the other regulatory framework, and then the IFRA standards evolve, but in the regulatory framework you have the old rules. And we have seen that one of the problems we have in Europe, where there's a few old standards that are now graved in stone, but there was never an update. So I always say, if somebody likes to work with the IFRA standards and takes the New Zealand approach, by moving on, if you find the developments useful, but then also ensure that there's the updates, because otherwise it's creating an issue. And by the way, I hope my president has noted that there's an absolute urgent need for me to travel to New Zealand and present to the New Zealand government the tools. Yeah, you took note of that. All right, good. Sorry. We were talking about how we move on, and Klaus Overlever, you are also carefully watching what our RIFM colleagues are doing and how their science evolves. There is all this question about animal testing and norms. So do you see a need that we also better explain the RIFM science, and how can we do that? Because it is the foundation for the IFRA standards. And maybe just, even so we said it several times, we look at the RIFM safety assessments, and if the RIFM safety assessment concludes the current use is not safe, pop, IFRA sets a standard. So, but that requires that we are also ensuring that the RIFM science is up to speed. Are we confident with that? And where do we eventually need to be more transparent? Do we need to promote more the RIFM science, because it is useful and helpful for the standards?
Yeah, definitely. I think transparency is always important, and we can do more. I agree on that one. So it shouldn't look like a black box that comes up and says, so science-based, you have to do this, standard, done. I mean, that was okay for some time, but now if you explain really, especially to legislators, what is behind and what was the driving force behind why a certain science approach has been used, then it will be much more accepted at the end of the day. Because you can go, as you know, science is not black and white, you can go different routes, and if nobody tells you which route has been taken, someone might say, okay, then you have to do this one, and then we, in the worst case, have to repeat everything, coming to the same result, but this is a waste of time and effort at the end of the day. So yes, being more transparent, being in a dialogue with the legislator to explain what science has been used to derive for which result, and maybe extend even to say, okay, if there are other ideas, we could also do the other way around and incorporate this in the science that RIFM is doing.
Perfect, I fully agree. I think it was Marie-Helene earlier who mentioned, at least one mentioned that, I mean, defending a global approach is quite challenging, and we are setting the bar very high. But I think something that is really unique, and I don't know many other industries that have that, is the insight on consumer exposure. And Marie-Helene, also your companies are engaged in surveys. You are bothered with regular surveys from RIFM on amounts of fragrance used. Do you think we do that enough? Because I think it's a cornerstone, having a good insight in consumer exposure. That is a perfect basis for doing a good risk assessment. Do you have recommendations for improving that, or do you think we are doing the right thing? We are frequently enough updating our system, or is there any other aspect we think we should do better?
I think, first of all, the survey that is conducted is not done by anybody else in the world. So RIFM has the best knowledge on where the fragrances are used all over the world and up to in which kind of category of product, and they know very well the maximum percentage used. And obviously, when we are big companies like L'Oréal, the best field is we see that our consumers we are using IFRA standards, and the best test is we don't have so much problem on the market with our billion of consumers using our products. So this is also a very good test. But science that is behind IFRA and RIFM is very important also to communicate through scientists. I don't know if there's ambassadors of science, of RIFM scientists all over the world, because we need more and more regulators to refer to IFRA standards to make the world, I mean, to protect again our consumers, because that's the first thing we have to have in mind, is the protection of our consumers. So we don't want standards to be done by sub-experts that may put some risk on our fragrance products. And what the consequences that could happen if we have issues with fragrance, and if consumers, we lost the trust of the consumers, is that we are going to lose fragrance at all. Because we already know that many consumers are asking for products that do not contain the word of fragrance. So that's a very important and strategic point that we have all to take in mind, is how we are going to defend fragrance. Because the trust, we are losing more and more trust of consumers, and maybe because some companies, some small maybe brands, are putting on the market products that are unsafe and induce some allergy or whatever. So we need RIFM, we need IFRA, we need standards to build that trust and to go to regulators and maybe, like you did in New Zealand, refer to IFRA standards, because we need to protect our consumers and we need to keep fragrance in our product, because next year we may not be there.
Thank you. Well said. Catherine, again to Australia. And we had some engagement with your regulators, explaining the tools. Do you think that is a useful exercise to continue? I think we really have a nice basis of understanding, and they also sometimes pose questions to us when it comes to fragrance use. So I think we could establish a trust relationship over the years. Maybe again that can be improved. What do you think from your perspective? Is there something where we should become more active?
Yes. Can we have Matthias come up to Australia as well for a couple of weeks? Because that could be quite useful.
Sure.
But in terms of engaging with regulators, also talk to us because we have the local knowledge on which regulators might be open to that engagement. And also, it may not even be the regulators that you engage with, or not only the regulators you engage with, but also policy bodies. So, I mean, being an Australian, I'm acutely aware of the discussions happening in Australia right now. There is a lot of interest in increasing productivity and increasing competition. I think that's happening in a lot of regions at the moment. And that discussion means how can we do more with less? And IFRA standard is a perfect example how we can do more with less. If we didn't have to do assessment of every fragrance ingredient in Australia, then that's amazing. So that's not actually a discussion that's happening at a regulator level. That's happening at a departmental central government level. So it might be useful to have that discussion there as well as engaging with regulators, or at the same time, in order to actually make an impact to that discussion. So that's one point. The second point is communicating science is hard. I mean, I'm a scientist by training, I've been a chemist by training, and I've in my youth believed that if I just tell them the truth and explain things how they are and say, yeah, we know, trust me, I know, I'm a scientist, then things will be okay. It's not. People don't trust scientists. Just, they don't anymore. So how do we make these discussions interesting or relevant for consumers means that we also have to think differently about how we communicate. So I know that RIFM and IFRA, all of that process and transparency of that process is really, really important. Your average consumer, your average government person that is not a technical person is not going to understand that. So that has to be accompanied by something that is easily digestible and understood. And it has to be out there as a simple message.
Excellent point. I fully agree, and I think we should be open to ideas down that road. And as you say, the statement, trust me, I'm a scientist, doesn't work anymore, if it have ever worked. Sirvin, talking about trust, talking about consumer concerns, is there anything you see in the Thai market where consumers are specifically concerned about safety related to fragrance that maybe we were overlooking? Or is there anything on the horizon, any discussion on consumer safety that you think we should be aware of and that we should maybe integrate better in our system?
Well, speaking of that, I think the Thai people, they are keep up with the trends of the cosmetic globally around the world. We do sometimes, not we do, like the Thai people sometimes follow the trends from Korea, from the US, and also but at the same time we have the regulations to align with the ASEAN, and to be able to say it honestly, I think the ASEAN Cosmetic Directive have put the standard, the regulatory approaches quite good enough for the Thai people to be able to use it safe, and also, but how can I say this? For the Thai context, I think if the IFRA Association would like to put forward to have the cooperation with the regulators, and also especially in Thailand, I would recommend, and this is my personal recommendation, you may want to have the cooperation with the associations in Thailand. It might be easier than to have the cooperation with the government, but not by saying that, I'm not saying that the Thai regulators are not welcoming the associations globally, yeah. But having the collaboration among between the regulators and association, it would have the benefit to protect the Thai consumer for using the cosmetic in the country safely. Yeah.
Thank you. I think you're touching on a very important point, which is also something about global collaboration and collaborating with the local partners, with the local associations, getting into dialogue. I fully agree, and that's certainly something we try to do as best as we can, but it's the right entry door. I would fully agree. Sean, before we open questions up to the public, who I think they're still awake, they are following us very carefully. Good. We are working with updates on a more or less regular 3-year cycle. So we are collecting information, we are grouping standards in our amendment because we consider that is more fair to the users of the standards, and we also see in regulatory schemes they're actually doing the same, they call it a different way. I think in Europe they love to call it omnibus. Even until today I don't understand what an omnibus has to do with grouping of measures, but it doesn't matter. So do you think with this 3-year cycle, do you think that's fast enough in addressing issues? I mean, we have, I would call it a kind of escape route. If there is really a severe health concern, we can intervene, or we would intervene immediately, but regularly we do it every 3 years. From your perspective, is that okay? Should we be faster? Can we take more time?
Yeah, so from our perspective, I think a 3-year cycle is pretty good. Much faster than that, and that would start to get beyond what we can keep up with, I think, from a resourcing perspective. And that gives you enough time in between, but it's also short enough to address concerns as they come up from a scientific perspective. So I think that would be good. Yeah.
Thank you. Good. I don't know how we are doing time-wise because this green clock here is going on, but I don't know what it means in reality, but that is not important. Anybody having any, you have a wonderful panel here. Anybody having any questions? This is the green time is the correct time. Thank you. Good. So we still have some time for people in the audience to pose questions. And again, I cannot see even half of you. I just see a beamer. Again, here I really feel like Madonna. Yes, please. I don't know how she does it, but anyway.
Darius Sabaliūnas, Procter & Gamble. I wanted to press on a point that came up in the conversation. I don't think we got a definitive answer to it. What do you think would be appropriate mechanisms that we need to use to go after so-called bad actors? Companies that are not following IFRA standards and potentially putting unsafe products out there on the market. Discussing it with the regulators, having nice collaboration, I don't think that is going to solve it.
Interesting question. Is anybody here willing to give it a first shot? Catherine, please.
I'll give it a go on that one because it actually is working with regulators, because it is the responsibility of regulators to keep safe products in the country. We as an industry can tell companies that they really should be complying with IFRA standards, and we have no teeth. We're an industry association. We have no enforcement powers, nothing that a regulator has. Now, what we find challenging is that regulators we see, and I'm trying to be very careful here, there is a lot more resource put to making regulations than in enforcing. And that's part of the problem. So even if IFRA standard was implemented in Australia, let's say, and it became a mandatory requirement, unless it is enforced, you're always going to have the same problems of bad actors. And we see that now in Australia, particularly challenging with online retailing, because it is easier and goes through less vetting, let's say, than a bricks and mortar sort of stores where people can go and say, well, I bought it here, right? And it's easier to disappear. So we have been talking to our regulators and talking about, not just for fragrances, but generally, about a regulatory system that is more modern and recognises the modern supply chain, and something that is focused on the end safety, so end user safety, rather than what is written down on paper. Because rules, I mean, there could be perfect rules, but if it's not enforced, then it's useless. So yes, government conversation is really the only thing we have.
Thank you. Great perspective. I would not disagree at all. Anybody wants to? Yeah, Sean?
Yeah,
Please.
I'll just say quickly from the regulatory perspective, we would, as we have the IFRA standards in our regulations, if someone's not complying with them, then you can notify us. We do have a compliance and enforcement team that will take that on board. So it is easier when the IFRA standards are in the regulation because it gives you that mechanism then.
Yeah, and we have, I mean, for some years, you have the question in a second. I see you. Alain, just a second. Just trying also to say, I mean, from IFRA perspective, we had been looking into compliance programs for years. We actually had a compliance program run. The problem at our level is that the products as such, you cannot judge on compliance. I mean, on the fragrance mixture, the compliance question, and I think that's why I liked your answer so much, happened at the moment it's used in a finished consumer product. So at our level, there is really not that much we can really do to push for compliance other than explaining, doing our work in the right way and ensuring everybody understands and can implement. So I just wanted to add that. Alain, please.
Yes, sorry. Just to answer for ASEAN, the compliance to IFRA standard is mandatory requirement. So the regulators have the possibility to ask for the proof that the product meets the IFRA standard, the fragrance meets the IFRA standard, and the concentration in the finished product meet the requirement in the standard. Because the fragrance is one thing, but if you are using a higher quantity in your product that the requirement, you're not complying. So one thing that the biggest hurdle we have is fragrance company do not providing IFRA compliance certificate. And we have to go back and ask and ask and ask until they comply. Okay? This is one thing that is more important today. And then, of course, finished product companies have to make sure that the level they're using is complying. But it's basically impossible to take a product from the market, analyze it to say it meets or it doesn't meet the standard. It's not something that is easily feasible. So it has to be based on auditing the files of the company. And by making it a mandatory requirement, it's possible in ASEAN. It's not, I think we were the first one. I'm not sure if we're the only one today still making the IFRA standard a mandatory requirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Alain. Please, Rob. Microphone in the front. And then I see you. Yes, you will be next. Sorry, Rob. You start, and then we have another question over there.
Thank you, Rob Roggevent, Procter & Gamble. I think the panel made some reference to how the IFRA standards could expand with some of the new endpoints. I think it was referred to some of the environmental endpoints. I wonder if the panel could elaborate a little bit how they see the IFRA standards evolving for these new endpoints.
Anybody is willing to? Well, it's maybe a big challenge for you. First of all, I mean, environmental safety assessment takes place under our RIFM colleagues. The endpoints at which they look I'm not sure it covers everything you had in mind right now, but I'm pretty sure they will check that. But we environmental safety assessment is part of our safety assessment, and we have one standard, muscxylene, which was banned due to its environmental issues and not the human health ones. So, but maybe we can take that on, and I would rather bring it into the dialogue with my RIFM colleagues if that would be an adequate answer to you. Yeah. And now over there, and I'm really sorry, you're sitting. I can't even see.
Matthias, Aurelia.
Oh, Aurelia, it's you.
From RIFM, so I'll be more than happy to talk to you about environmental endpoints, because we actually do have environmental standards under IFRA umbrella. But I want to comment on two of the aspects that were discussed with the panel. One is can we do any better on survey? And in order for us in industry to progress with having a realistic concentrations, we need to make sure everybody responds to the survey in correct way. I know it's a lot of work for all the members to respond to the surveys, but they're really crucial for the IFRA standards. They're really crucial on setting those concentrations for individual, different categories. So it's always a RIFM plea to please respond to survey. For the environmental, we do want to make sure we have the correct exposures for each regions. We are doing global environmental risk assessment. So we do want to have that information in order to have a very realistic picture of what's going on with the fragrances, not only for human health, but also environmental. And another thing that I want to comment on it was what we can do in order for people to understand science. And I think it's not only a trade association's job to promote the science, I think it's everybody's job to promote the science, because we're trying to do as much by publishing risk assessment, talking about our methods. But if we as an industry don't talk about it more and more, especially in front of the regulators, they just don't know that we exist. They just don't know that science exists. And I think it's our job to promote the science to the best abilities and make sure they're aware of the new methods, of the work that is being done through RIFM, to IFRA, and everybody else within the room, because that's the only way we're going to be able to succeed in getting acceptance of the new methodology and making sure fragrances are safely used around the globe.
Thank you. Time is nearly over. I would like to allow every participant in this panel to make a final statement if he or she wants. And if you allow me, I would start. We've been talking so much about safety. And I started my career as a perfumer. So I think in all this discussion about safety, and we have safety at the highest level, we hope that we are still able to produce wonderful products that the consumer in the market can enjoy safely. So, but we want the creative people to be able to continue to bring nice products in the market, and I hope we are able to bridge that. Any of you, maybe I start just on this side, Marie-Hélène, do you have any final statement you want to make? This panel was crap, and I would never come again. Whatever, you feel free, feel free.
I'm glad to have regulators on the panel, because without regulators, we will not be able to align IFRA standards with the consumer trust. And this is very important that you believe in science, you believe in these standards. And what I like to say also is, please do not create new category of products, because it's becoming with Europe and IFRA. I mean, we have more than hundreds of categories, and it's becoming very difficult to manage operationally. So if you rely to standard, IFRA standard, it's very nice for us.
Thank you. Catherine.
I think key is collaboration, and I think the importance of collaboration not only with industry and regulators, but across industry as well, the supply industry and the consumer product industry. That's always important, so that we can work together to address any challenges. So I don't know whether you're aware, but we get notified all the time from regulators when they want to ban a fragrance component, and they just seem to think that the consumer product company would know exactly what fragrance components are in all of their products. We don't. We need to reach out to our suppliers before we find that information. And often we get, less than 4 weeks notice to do that. So if we can work more closely and let you know so that your members are aware, I think that could be really useful as well in providing that information in a timely way so we don't lose ingredients unnecessarily.
Thank you. Well taken. Klaus Oliver?
Yeah, I think one of the important outcome here is definitely we need transparency, and we keep going on the dialogue with all the involved parties to make sure everyone understands what the other one is doing, what the other one is asking for, and then going in the same direction.
Thanks. Great. Sirubhen.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of things that I would like to mention in the last section is here is the as the regulators, we have the responsibility to control, to regulate the cosmetic product to be safe for the consumers, and this is the definite our responsibility, and we do we use the science-based and to do the regulations here. And also, I heard a couple of times for the transparency. I would put the another aspect here for transparency is the education, not only to educate the consumers and also, but the members of the associations here to know all the standards that IFRA has put into the society. Yeah.
I think, thanks for bringing up that word education. I think that was very relevant as well. Sean, you have the nearly last word.
Thanks. Yeah, so in a previous talk it was mentioned that the regulatory space is getting more complex and that hasn't changed. And it feels a little bit like we're entering a period where there's more fragmentation than there was a drive to harmonization through GHS, through REACH-like regulations. Now we seem to be seeing sort of a retrenchment away from that with different regulators moving at different speeds and different directions. The key is to manage this is always going to be good science and transparency. That's the only way that it's going to be able to get the argument across for what you're trying to defend. And I think you're moving in the right direction on that. So thank you.
Well, then I would like to thank this really great panel. I'm always happy if I have the feeling we could continue talking rather than somebody tells me the time is over, but the time is now red. So I think we are moving out of this panel. Again, big thank you, and I hope it was entertaining, informative to the group, and I'll let somebody else tell you what's next. Yeah, Valerie is already here.
Thank you, Matthias, Jennifer, and all our panelists for this insightful conversation. It